This morning I listened to an excellent podcast by Scott Kesterton over at Bards FM. And I actually listened to it on a repost. So thank you, SGT Report at thephaser.com. Shout out to you for bringing this to everybody's attention. It was a really great podcast. And it was all about, it touched on the Texas shooter and questions we need to be asking about that case that just happened. But also, Scott went into something called Operation Crimson Mist by reading part of an article written, I forget what year, we'll get to it in a minute, about something that happened in Rwanda and probably in Iraq as well. And all of this is about frequencies. The use of frequencies to affect humans, either individually or in groups. And the research on this has been going on for decades and decades, and I believe now they've got it down to a really fine science. So this is a gigantic topic with lots of great experts out there. But I just want to pull some threads that came up immediately for me when I was listening to Scott's really good talk on the potential use of these weapons to create the situations that happen. Let's start. The first thing is an article by a guy called Joe Viles, and it's actually from 2003. Scott Kesterton mentioned this and read from it in his podcast. So go listen to that whole thing. But I want to just bring a few things up from the article for you. It's the tale of what happened in Rwanda. Do you remember the genocide between the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda? Well, he talks here, he opens the piece by saying that right before it happened, there was a plane crash that took out the leadership of two important African countries, of course, Rwanda itself and then Burundi. And he says that this opened the door. This allowed them to do the next phase of an operation called Operation Crimson Mist. And Joe Viles says it is the most obscene terminal mind control experiment ever mounted by the United States of America against a sovereign nation. That Crimson Mist has been used again recently on a smaller scale in Iraq is now beyond doubt. So in the article, he talks about a little team that was assembled, carefully screened for their willingness to commit mass murder. And they were assembled in Rwanda, waiting for the go. And when the go came, they got into a C-130 Hercules plane, and they mounted a microwave weapon on the back of it. They went over the crowds that were demonstrating. The two sides were there, the Hutus and the Tutsis, and the story goes that they were blasted. The one side was blasted with this microwave weapon, and their anger turned into uncontrollable rage, and what resulted was a massacre. It was a fast action genocide, one part of the country against another. And Joe Viles, in his article, claims that it was precipitated by, first of all, prepping the ground by planting suspicion about that plane crash that killed the leaders in the minds of the people. So they built up tension, and then they flew this Hercules plane over and unleashed these frequencies on the people. And there was a genocide. Violence, machetes, they just hacked each other to pieces. And what he says here is what the Hercules crew had just achieved has been an open secret since the late 50s, when researchers accidentally discovered that there is a precise control brainwave for literally everything we do and for everything we feel. The problem back then was that each of these control brainwaves, rage, fear, panic, lethargy, vomiting, and so on, had to be transmitted with an accuracy taken out to 3 decimal places, or they simply did not work at all. But as the years rolled by, and with the advent of transistors and microprocessors, the operational application of precise control brainwaves became practical reality. Later on in the piece, Viles makes the case based on video evidence and reasoning that the same type of tech was deployed in Iraq during the civilian looting and destruction of the Baghdad Museum and several hospitals. Do you remember that? And the news used the footage to prove that the Iraqis were just an out-of-control people that badly needed the intervention of the Western democracies to teach them, how to behave properly. Well, was that actually a careful setup, just the same way they did in Rwanda? Joe Viles says, yes, it's beyond dispute. But my question is, how would they have gotten just the Hutus to be subject to those frequencies? It's alleged that the one side was more out of control than the other, right? The one side won the genocide, if you want to look at it in those sick terms. So how would they do that? Now, because I'm picturing the scenario where it would be very hard to pick out just that side from a crowd. I don't know, because I wasn't there. I don't know if there was a big division in between these people or something, but if they were mingling, how would they just sort of trigger the one side into that kind of a blind rage? And I'm wondering if it could be something to do with how their bodies were prepared in advance. I want you to listen to a short clip of a man named Dr. Pierre Gilbert. It's from 1995, and he's warning the public about magnetic vaccines. Now, isn't that something? Because the suspicion is that there are magnetic particles, graphene, or other things in the vaccines. Researchers have found this in there, or so they say. I'm not claiming to know what's true. I'm just bringing you the information. Now, just listen to Dr. Pierre Gilbert. You're going to have to look at the screen because he is French and the subtitles are on the bottom. All right? I'll be back in a second. Watch this.
Biologique, il y a plus que les tempêtes organisées par les champs électromagnétiques. Il y a également la pollution que nous mettrons dans le sang et dans les veines de l'humanité en créant des infections. Et ensuite de ça, ayant créé ces infections volontairement, on créera des lois qui obligera la population à se faire donner des vaccins. Et dans ces vaccins, il y aura tout ce qu'il faut pour que vous puissiez être contrôlés. On introduira dans ces vaccins des cristaux liquides. Ces cristaux se logeront dans les cellules de votre cerveau et ils deviendront des micro-récepteurs à des champs électromagnétiques envoyés par des ondes ultrasoniques à très très basse fréquence. Et avec ces ondes à très basse fréquence, on pourra vous empêcher de penser. On pourra faire de vous des zombies. Et n'allez pas croire que je suis au stage où je pense, ou c'est l'hypothèse. Ce que je vous compte, c'est fait. Souvenez-vous du Rwanda.
So he claims the same thing that Joe Viles is claiming, that something was phony about the genocide in Rwanda. It was created from the outside. Dr. Pierre Gilbert says it has to do with vaccines, and Joe Viles says it has to do with the microwave weaponry, from the plane. And I'm wondering if it isn't that it's a combination of factors that lets them do this. It reminds me a bit of the story of Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Do you remember him? This is the smear job that Wikipedia and Google does on him now. Andrew Jeremy Wakefield is a British anti-vaccine activist, former physician, and discredited academic who was struck off the medical register for his involvement in the Lancet MMR autism fraud, a 1998 study that falsely claimed a link between the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and autism. That's what they say about him. But, of course, the truth is much more complicated. And you see, Dr. Wakefield was a gastroenterologist, and a researcher. And he was noticing that babies and young children were getting bowel disease, inflammatory bowel diseases. And he thought possibly there was a connection between that gut biome problem and the vaccines, which may trigger autism. That, I know, again, it's been years since I've listened to him talk about it, but that's what I remember. It's sort of a combination factor that creates autism in some children and not in others. Could this be what we're looking at with Rwanda and other incidents, possibly? That you have to have a certain body state before these weapons work on you. And of course, you can see why I'm bringing all this up, because what is happening right now, there's two things that are being forced. They are attempting to force every person in the world into two things: getting a vaccine and carrying around a smartphone. They're also installing the 5G, soon to be 6G, everywhere they can, as fast as they can, which of course are transmitters. They're frequency transmitters. But why would they want everyone to get the vaccine so bad? Does it really make any sense other than profits? But they're even giving these vaccines away at cost now, just because they so badly want people to get them. What's in these vaccines, I wonder? And does it prep the body for stage 2, which is the frequencies? Now, some may argue that people are being forced into getting smartphones. And you're right. You're not really forced yet, just like you weren't really forced to get a vaccine. But increasingly, they are making access to things harder and harder unless you have a smartphone. And isn't it just amazing that people are going to go pay not only for the device, but they're going to pay a monthly fee to be hooked up to this system by which they can transmit specific frequencies that could be tailored to you. And you hold this thing 8 to 12 inches away from your face. We don't know what they're doing with the lights in there. We don't know what they're doing with the frequencies that emit from there. We know how much they're tracking us, but what's coming out back at us, we don't fully know that. We do, however, know that they've got a huge database of personal health data on all of us and other data, psychological data, where we live, like what altitude we live at, what our body temperature is, what our fingerprints are. Not on me, I don't think, because I don't have one of these smart devices. I don't have one. So they have way less data on someone like me. But it won't really matter. Just like it didn't matter to the other side in the Rwandan genocide, it didn't matter that only one side got zapped with this frequency, did it? It still caused the genocide anyway. So that's why I always say ditch your smartphone. Ditch it, ditch it, ditch it. And, if you think you can get away with just using it sometimes, well, I want to guilt trip you. You are dragging the whole world down with you for the sake of whatever it is that you think you need off that thing. You're dragging the whole world into potential Rwanda situation. Okay, what have I got next for you here? Back to Joe Vile's article. He says, he mentions that one of the leading lights in this field of frequency manipulation is a woman called Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher-Buys, who was a nuclear scientist and blah, blah, blah. She worked for NASA and a whole bunch of other things I will tell you about possibly in another video. But look what she said. She says, "Give me the money in 3 months, and I'll be able to affect the behavior of 80% of the people in this town without their knowing it. Make them happy, or at least they'll think they're happy. Or aggressive," she says. She's something else. And like I said, I'll get into her in another video because it's really interesting where she ended up. Like what research she was doing towards the end of her life, and what she did early in her career as well. But in the meantime, I want to talk about her husband, because he was the one that was really into this research. and he was warning about it. Here, a tweet from Professor Trevor Marshall, February 3rd, 2021. I have the submission that cost William Buys his career. And here it is here. Biologic effects of non-ionizing radiation. And he says he has other books from different conferences and that, because Dr. Buys' work is being hidden. And I can attest to the fact that Dr. Buys is being hidden by the big tech giants, because if you try to search for him, they're going to do what they did with the purpurea plant, the purple pitcher plant. They're going to give you results that don't match your search terms. I can't believe how far the algorithm manipulation has gone. And make no mistake, it is on purpose manipulation. A computer program would return the result. All it does is match it up and return the result. So human beings, at some point, would have had to tell the algorithm not to return William Buys as a first result, but instead substitute it. Not to return Sarracenia purpurea as a first result, but instead to hide it down further in the results. Put something else there that's similar so that it confuses people or draws them off track. Do you see what I'm saying? This is human manipulation, purposefully hiding the facts. And see, why would they want to hide William Buys? Well, because in his studies, he found that people were being harmed by non-ionizing radiation. And nobody wanted to hear it. Here is a Senate committee report from 1977 at which Dr. Buys made submissions, a summary of his concerns, and then his research reports. According to Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, Buys' wife, Buys had to drop his microwave safety research after the Senate hearing. And he died some years ago. He died in 2012. Well, we do have access to what he sent to the Senate. He wrote them a letter. I'll leave the link to this in the description box. I'm going to read some selected parts of it for you now. The pilot study findings suggest that brain waves and possibly behavior are affected at specific frequencies at substantially lower power levels of RF than people can be exposed to in their daily lives. Whereas further research is necessary to verify or deny the pilot study findings, it is my opinion that a meaningful risk factor already exists for the population at large. Electronics engineers are dedicated to designing, building, and maintaining better and ever more sophisticated products for radiating and detecting all kinds of electromagnetic waves. With the exception of careful respect for high voltages, currents, and power, a good engineer will insist that low-power microwaves or radio waves cannot possibly affect the human behavior and/or health. As an engineer who held that view for 14 years, I can attest to this fact. Except for a rather dramatic incident in 1970 involving my wife, who was nearby while I was troubleshooting some gear with low-power microwave generator, I might not have done a pilot study of RF effects, and I might still have remained unconvinced that low-level microwaves, radio waves are hazardous at specific frequencies. Since I became a clinical instructor in environmental medicine at the University of Oregon Health Sciences Center, it has become apparent to me that most physicians are unaware that low-level radio wave biological effects can mimic many symptoms of various defined diseases. Interesting. I wonder what those are. I have found the entire subject of radio wave hazards very unpopular to science, business, industry, and the military, perhaps because recognizing these hazards would cause so many necessary changes in these various areas. And indeed, as we saw, he was forced to discontinue his microwave safety studies after that Senate hearing. Instead of those people who are meant to guard the health of the population, instead of them pouncing on this and calling a halt immediately to further and further use of radio frequencies, they just buried the truth because of profits and possibly also because of control. They knew what control this would give them over people. Using the legal power limit of 10 milliwatt per square centimeter, a malicious person could easily build or buy surplus equipment that could physically and mentally damage people over a period of time without the victim ever knowing what was happening to him. The members of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government may even be more vulnerable to this kind of personal harassment than the ordinary citizen. Boom. Is that what is happening to our leaders? Because you cannot deny it. They seem like complete maniacs now. They contradict themselves and don't even bat an eye. They say the most heinous things. They laugh when they talk about forcing their populations to get the jab and things like that. I mean, what is going on with them? Do you remember that guy I brought to you? His name is Brian Pallister. He was the leader of a province in Canada called Manitoba. And he switched on a dime when someone asked about ivermectin and then started blabbering about the people who make it rain. And there's so many other examples of this type of thing happening. So good point that he made, that they could be manipulated from afar and not even know it. And public office holders and judges and stuff like that, they'd be more targeted. They'd be more likely to be a target of this than anybody else. So he was trying to warn people, and they, of course, did not listen. This is the paper that he submitted with his letter to the senators, and it's called Radio Frequency Induced Interference Responses in the Human Nervous System. So he did this experiment, this pilot study, and he says this: the subject's EEG traces displayed desynchronized alpha waves of 15 to 25% higher than normal amplitude, and slow waves appeared at certain radio frequencies. Conversely, diminution and desynchronization of alpha wave amplitude on the order of 20 to 50% occurred at other radio frequencies, and 2 to 6 hertz slow waves appeared. These two anomalous patterns were found in both men and women volunteers. Mental attitudes appeared to change during the tests. And that is what is so concerning. And that is what is being alleged elsewhere now. And that is the kind of new generation MK Ultra, trauma-based, drug-based mind control that the CIA, and let's face it, the CIA always gets the rap, but tons of organizations are looking into this and have been for decades. This is just the next generation, the more perfect answer to MK Ultra. You don't have to get people, into a cult and then kind of abuse them and traumatize them and repeat phrases over to them until they buy totally in. This is different. This is using biology and frequencies and possibly chemicals in food or drugs in a combination that people would not expect, and in a way they can be sitting in their living room and it happens to them. So creepy. And of course, keep in mind, that research is old. The 1970s. And then they buried it and kept on doing the research and kept on installing more and more radio frequency devices around us. I mean, think about it. Why did they want to change television? They forced people to switch to digital. Do you remember that? Why? Better tuning of the frequencies, better carrier waves. Why are they putting in 5G everywhere? It is not for faster movies. It's partly for the Internet of Things, but it's more for the Internet of bio-nano things. You know that exists? The Internet of biological, nano, particulate things. All right. And incidentally, this man who provided the link to that Senate report and to Dr. Baez's studies, Professor Trevor Marshall, he has his own site, Autoimmunity Research Foundation, and I have not looked at anything on this yet, but I wanted to share it with you because I will be I will be looking at it. It looks really interesting. Inflammatory disease in the human microbiome, electrosmog and autoimmune disease. This is a really important topic. And, there's a slight chance, I'm not really saying I believe this, but there's a slight chance that all the vaccines were all saline. And every illness that is coming after them, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot, are actually radio frequency illnesses. Something to do with the person's environment, or even coming right off these things that they hold in their hand, carry around with them, and never leave. I don't know. I'm just spitballing as usual. All right, and the final thing I wanted to bring up, I think, second to last thing before I sign off. Don't forget about Celeste Solum. She has done a series called Whack-A-Brain, and I have not watched that yet either, but I did watch this morning. Havana Syndrome in Public Cognitive Warfare next. Havana Syndrome, do you remember that? This has happened a few times now, where a group of, the Havana thing was a group of diplomats in Cuba ended up really sick with a variety of symptoms, and a lot of them, maybe most of them, are not expected to ever be able to work again or, have their old lives back. They suffered horrible symptoms from this mysterious frequency. And that now it's happened in 2 other places as well since then. So Celeste Solum was just going over that a bit with Ramala here. And she said, more or less, this was an advertisement for her 4-part series called Whack-A-Brain, where she was going to go into the science of how all of this works and the fact that she thinks this is the war that's coming to us. This is what we all have to guard against, and whether we can or not, I don't know. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description box for you. And finally, I want to remind you all that I did a video a while back on my other channel, More Polly, called What's with the Magnets? And there's a ton of links in the description box for this video that I used as references, just a ton of links. And I encourage you to go get those links from that video and look through them. One of the things I had in there was this article from 2016 in a section of The Guardian called Neurophilosophy. I mean, give me a break. These people think that they have no ethics. They have no ethics, but they like to pretend that, well, if we just kind of play with individual neurons in people's brains for the good of society, then we are ethical, right? Yeah. Okay, but the article is all about genetically engineered magnetoproteins that remotely control brains and behavior, and they talk about the experiments that they did in mice. I talk about that and much, much more in this video, What's with the Magnets. I highly recommend you go watch it. Of course I do. Okay, so in this video we've covered Bards FM, Scott Kesterton's podcast on Operation Crimson Mist, and a reference that he used called Operation Crimson Mist, Electronic Slaughter in Rwanda by a man called Joe Viles. I showed you Dr. Pierre Gilbert's warning about magnetic vaccines that he claims are partly responsible for what happened in the Rwandan genocide. We talked about Dr. Trevor Marshall and Dr. William Bies's report to the Senate committee, and I reminded you about my video, What's with the Magnets? So I hope, this was just a mishmash of things about frequencies as weapons. It's really important that everybody learn about this because, it really is possible that that's a lot of the crazy news we're being shown right now is a distraction from people honing in on the real problem, which is the installation of these 5G towers with frequencies that are way out there in the spectrum that possibly shouldn't be being used at all. The lower ones, the other ones, the ones they've already been using have caused enough damage, and there's a lot of evidence out there to suggest it. So now they're going to put a whole new spectrum out there. And 6G, by the way, which is coming, is 100 to 10,000 times more fast, or whatever they want to call it, smaller pulses as 5G. So if indeed some of the illnesses that we are seeing happen in clusters of the population since the vaccine program, COVID vaccine program rolled out, if they are not monkeypox, if they are not vaccine induced completely, they could be induced by these frequencies, and they might be coming directly from things they install around you, or they might be coming directly from this box you carry around and pay for, that they are increasingly trying to force everyone to get along with a vaccine. Could be from that. So, cost of living's going crazy, right? Once you save yourself some money and cut your data plan for the smartphones, just untether from that cell that may be beaming really harmful frequencies at you and your family. Okay. Everybody, thank you for being here. I'm going to stop talking now. Please go over to my website, amazingpolly.net. That's where I have a collection of articles and videos from around the web that I think you might find interesting. I also have a contact page there where you can send me a letter. You get my address, or you can send me a digital gift. There's an online contribution form there for you too, if you would like to keep me in business. I would really appreciate it. And thank you just so much to everyone who has done that. And I got a few more letters this week than last week, so my sincere thanks to those of you who put pen to paper and took the time to lick a stamp and bring it down to the mailbox. I love that. All right, everybody. Until next time, peace out.